My name is Nimrod Goren, and I'm glad to welcome you to the third annual Middle East in Transition Conference conducted by the Department for Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem with the Institute for Asian and African Studies and the Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace. The conference is conducted under the auspice of the Reuven and Mordechai Abir Foundation. Unfortunately, Professor Mordechai Abir is not able to join us here, but his generosity enabled not only these conferences, but the conferences before that in the last 2 years, and also the scholarship that we are going to award today for MA students in modern Middle Eastern studies. I'll try now a bit better. We gathered in this hall some 10 months ago for the second annual Middle East in Transition Conference. It was just when the Arab Spring began to unfold, and now, almost a year afterwards, with many things that have changed and have going on in the region since, we have a bit more of a broader perspective and a broader context to try to figure out and expand our knowledge of what is going on in the region around us. Some people are viewing the Arab Spring with concern, others with hopes, but almost everyone agrees that we in Israel need to develop a better comprehension of the countries around us. This is something that we will try to do in this conference today and tomorrow. We have begun doing so in the panel that was just completed on the Palestinian society and politics. After our session now, we will have a keynote by Ambassador Martin Indyk on the US strategy regarding the region in turmoil. And tomorrow morning at 9:30, we'll be meeting at Bet Meyersdorf, room 405, to discuss Islamic movements in a changing reality, to discuss Turkey's foreign policy, and to discuss what is going on in Syria, in Egypt, and in Libya. I want to thank, before we begin, the organizing committee of the conference, Zhenya Yudkevich, who worked with me on producing the conference, to Irina, to the staff of the Truman Institute. All of them were very helpful and instrumental. Greetings, Professor Reuven Amitai, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, not only the Dean, but the one who initiated and was very much involved in the first such conference before taking the post of the Dean. Professor Amitai, please.
Thank you, Nimrod. Dear colleagues, students, and guests from Israel and abroad, in the name of the Faculty of Humanities at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I am very pleased and honored to welcome you to the campus on Mount Scopus for the third conference on the Middle East in Transition. It is a good thing that we get together once a year to look at developments in the Middle East. Certainly, a lot has happened in our region since the last meeting of this forum, a little under a year ago. Anyone with eyes and ears in their head has some knowledge of the riveting changes in the Arab world, which can be summed up by the toppling of a number of authoritarian regimes and the accompanying moves towards democracy in many places, as inchoate and sputtering as these latter processes may be. The emergence of the Islamist movements in these countries as a driving force is also something that demands our attention. To this, we can add that a couple of regimes of the authoritarian type are now wobbling, and we watch with interest their future prospects. One cannot help but notice that the most stable regimes in the region are those headed by kings. This is not necessarily the situation predicted a few years ago. Of course, our region is not only the Arab world. Turkey, and not only its relations with our country, continues to preoccupy us. It is clear that the policy of zero problems in foreign affairs by the Turkish government remains an unfulfilled aspiration. And President Erdogan also has his hands full with all kinds of internal concerns. Iran keeps on interesting us, and not just because of its not always subtle attempts to achieve a nuclear capability. Further afield, we follow events in Afghanistan, Central Asia, and Pakistan, each of which could easily fill the agenda of a conference. Let us not forget matters of interest in other directions, be it in the Eastern Mediterranean or the Horn of Africa, which should also demand our attention. Finally, we could note, even if it is parenthetical in the framework of the present conference, that the larger Middle East is continually influenced by developments further afield, whether it is the crisis of the euro or the emerging international impact of China. In short, we have been fortunate that our little country is situated in a very large region of tremendous change, which provides us with an ongoing opportunity to follow developments and events closely while concurrently trying to look at the broad picture. This is not only an intellectual exercise, but one of immense practical interest for us in Israel. However, we are not a government office or even an independent think tank. Rather, as a university, with a relatively large staff of specialists in Middle Eastern and related studies, we have the opportunity to look at matters in a somewhat dispassionate way, without denying that these observations may interest those with more practical concerns. It is certainly good that this yearly forum has been established at the Hebrew University, and it enables us to take a step back from our usual ongoing concerns and to try to look at the broader picture of developments in the region and even future prospects. This is a very good opportunity to thank our friend, colleague, and teacher, Professor Mordechai Abir, who has the vision and generosity to establish this yearly meeting that has become a mainstay in the calendar of events at Mount Scopus, and not only for specialists in modern Middle Eastern studies. Professor Abir was unable to join us this evening, so I take the opportunity to wish him the very best, not only from his colleagues and former students, but from all present here. As long as I have started with the thank yous, I will express appreciation to the hard work applied by my colleagues from the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies and the Institute of Asian and African Studies. Deans have home departments, and it is with pride that I can say I am a member of both of these frameworks. I should especially note the important role of our untiring and highly capable administrator, Mrs. Jenia Yudkovich, for her efforts. Our thanks go also to the Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace, which has become the strategic partner of these yearly meetings. And I think this is for everybody's benefit. The Faculty of Humanities is grateful for its support and encouragement and cooperation. Finally, I am happy to single out the great contribution of our younger colleague, Dr. Nimrod Goren, who ably coordinated the organization of this conference, showing his admirable administrative talents. We are grateful to him and all the others who have worked so hard to prepare the very interesting and varied program before you. At this point, I think it is time to quote the great observer of human affairs, Groucho Marx. And now, on with the opera. Let joy be unconfined. Joy or not, the time has come to continue on with the program, and I am sure that along with me, you are all looking forward to the address by our distinguished guest, Ambassador Martin Indyk, who was kind enough to join us here to share his thoughts on regional developments. I return the podium to the chair and wish you all a pleasant and interesting evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Amitai. Mr. Carmi Gilon, the Vice President of the University, was supposed to join us, could not make it because of illness, and he sends his apologies and welcome to everyone. Next is Professor Stephen Kaplan, Academic Director of the R.S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace. Please.
Thank you very much, Nimrod. Welcome to all of our colleagues from here in Israel, for our guests from abroad, from members of the diplomatic staff. It's really a pleasure to see all of you here, and it's a pleasure to continue this, what has become now, I guess, a tradition of the conferences on the Middle East in transition, since this is the third year, and so it's already more than just either an accident or a coincidence that we're meeting in this framework. Reuven mentioned that he belongs to both the Institute of Asian and African Studies and the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies. Since I belong to both of those and also the Truman Institute, I think I've sort of trumped you on that. And it sounds sort of strange there for me to say how pleased I am about the wonderful cooperation that's developed between the three wings to put the conference like this together, since in some way I represent all three of them. But I think really that it's a pleasure to see that at the university, increasingly we've gotten past these sort of sectional rivalries where the abilities we have and the tremendous resources we have get divided up in people repeating each other's efforts. And it's really the generosity of spirit of my colleagues that has made an event like this possible year after year. I have to say it's also possible to do an event like this year after year because of, I guess I would say, the generosity of our neighbors in this region who never seem to lack for interesting things for us to talk about. I think in putting together the titles of the lectures, I'm sure Nimrod frequently had to go to and look in his thesaurus to find words for developments, changes, transitions, an occasional turmoil, fortunately not yet perhaps chaos. But I think everyone will agree that, you know, when we had the last conference, if you remember, we planned it, and one of the titles of one of the sessions was Egypt After Mubarak. Just at the time that we chose the title, we thought we were talking about the future. You know, and keeping up with these things and planning a conference like this is one of the challenges, is to sort of think about what are the topics that are going to be most interesting to people. And I have to say, one of the things that's a special pleasure about this conference is the extent to which we've managed year after year to invite new speakers to join us, and rather than hearing simply the same speakers on the same topics. I want to add a personal note. When I came to the university over 30 years ago, one of the first people that I met was Professor Mordechai Abir. While everyone is very aware of Mocha's work on Saudi Arabia and oil, I always remind people that his doctorate he wrote about Ethiopia, and he was a dean at the University of Addis Ababa. His first book, which was based on his doctoral dissertation at the School of Oriental and African Studies, was called The Era of the Princes, which in some way might be referred to in Ethiopia, if you translate it literally, the era of the judges, because it's the period, again, to quote from the Old Testament. Reuven is quoting from Groucho Marx, and I find myself quoting from the book of Judges. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did which was right in his own eyes. I think the quote that Mocha chose to lead off his doctoral dissertation, which became his book, may in fact be a very appropriate quote for much of what we're seeing in the Middle East. It's a tremendous pleasure that we're able to mark his and Ruth's generosity, not only of spirit, but of means, and in helping us do the sort of work that we'd like to do. And I must say that I'd like to also take the opportunity, beyond thanking the Abirs and the Abir Foundation, to congratulate the students, because it's always a pleasure when we're able to recognize the excellence of the students we have here at the university. So thank you to everyone, and I hope we have very successful discussions.
When we hold conferences on regional issues, it's always good to have people from the region, so I want to thank Dr. Kivan Shulutsoy from Turkey for joining us. It's not taken for granted these days to have visitors from Turkey. And now we'll go on and acknowledge the excellence of our MA students in Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies who deal with modern issues. This scholarship is awarded for the third consecutive year, again, by the generosity of Mordechai Abir. There are not many financial support opportunities for students in the humanities and in Middle Eastern Studies, so I'm glad we can offer 7 students the scholarship today. We will call upon you to the stage to receive the scholarship from Professor Amitai, and eventually Yael Gidanian will tell a few words on behalf of the scholarship recipients. So first I would like to invite Yoshua Bekon, whose research interest is the role of the Arab and Palestinian civil societies in shaping perceptions about the conflict among the peoples of the region. Next is Yoni Graf, who deals with modern Muslim law, Muslim intellectuals who provide consultancy via the internet. Mr. Dan Kedem conducts research about Jewish musicians who immigrated to Israel from Iraq and Egypt in the 1950s. Ms. Yael Segev works on gender perceptions in Turkey's entertainment culture. Yoav Katz works on inter-Arab politics. Sivan Barel cannot join us today because she gave birth a week ago, so congratulations to her on that as well. And lastly, Ms. Yael Gidanian, who works on Palestinian perceptions and personal experiences regarding European activists in Israel and in the Palestinian Authority. And Ms. Gidanian, please.
Thank you. Dear professors, colleagues, friends, and family, dear guests, on behalf of the Mordechai Abir Scholarship recipients, I would like to thank Mrs. Ruth and Professor Mordechai Abir for the generous awards they have given us. As research students, we need plenty of time and availability so that we can develop our conceptions and ideas, learn and read a lot, and make our own research come true. With the help of the Abir Foundation, we can do all that and make progress. A lot has been already said about the situation of the academy in Israel, and especially in the fields of arts and humanities. During that time of lack of budgets, and mostly lack of understanding of the importance and essentiality of those fields for every society, it is good to have the Abir family and foundation putting their trusts in the next generation of scholars of Islam and Middle Eastern studies. I would also like to thank the good teachers that I have, that we all have here, and my family. So thank you, and I hope you all enjoyed the conference and learned some new and exciting things. Thank you.